was on June 1st, which feels like a year ago and a week ago at the same time. I know I was supposed to actually do this a few weeks back, but I actually got a concussion the night before, so I had to cancel. So it's a little bit less fresh on my mind, but I definitely still want to talk about that. So yeah, it was June 1st. I went to that protest in East Liberty, and for most of the protests, everything was going really well and without incident. People were singing songs, chanting things, and people were giving speeches, singing, reading poetry, and just really a wholesome, cathartic experience for a lot of people, I think. But later into the evening, the main portion of the protest ended. I think a lot of people were tired and wanted to go home. But a lot of people, including myself, wanted to keep marching. And, this was really within like a week after George Floyd was murdered, and people were really impassioned about it. So we did. We kept marching, and we marched down Center Avenue towards Giant Eagle. And as we neared that intersection of Center Ave and Negley, right by the Market District there, a line of police in full riot gear, gas masks, wielding batons and different sorts of firearms, set up a line in front of us and blocked the path. And they declared the protest an unlawful assembly, even though there was no violence or vandalism that I had witnessed or anybody else that I spoke to had witnessed either. And additionally, this was when there was a nightly curfew just with the unrest in Pittsburgh. But the night's curfew wasn't going to be in effect for over an hour from that point. So mostly confused and upset. I think a lot of us who were still there for the protest at that point didn't really want to leave. It kind of felt like a trampling of our First Amendment rights. And since nobody was in danger or being hurt, I don't think anybody really saw how they could just say, this is illegal now, you have to go home. So we stuck around, and people were chanting things like, this is not a riot, and hands up, don't shoot. And it's kind of crazy that we all felt the need to be chanting, this is not a riot, just please calm down, like you don't need to do this. But eventually they deployed tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets, beanbag rounds, flashbangs, all sorts of very scary things. It really was a terrifying moment, filled with screams and crying and coughing and gagging from the tear gas. Everything was really covered in a thick cloud of chemicals, and most people were, at least seemed to be running for their lives, they thought. And I, at that moment, kind of started walking away, but I didn't want to run. I didn't want to accidentally trample somebody, and I also kind of wanted to make sure that nobody was left behind. So unfortunately, that meant that I spent far too long in the cloud of tear gas and could barely breathe, barely keep my eyes open. It's not a great experience. I wouldn't recommend it. But so that night, I eventually got home, and thankfully I wasn't arrested, because many people were, and even people who were just trying to leave like they were told to, were trapped in the area and eventually arrested for failure to disperse, which doesn't quite seem right, because they weren't really letting people leave. Um, I do believe that eventually all of those charges were dropped, which is good. But um, that night I got home. I live pretty close by to East Liberty, so I could hear the helicopters droning above, um, all night long. And I I turned on the TV to watch this press conference that the mayor, and some other city officials and law enforcement officials uh, were giving. And basically, what they claimed was that they'd saved East Liberty from being burned to the ground. And I don't know if they truly thought that, or if that's what they wanted people to believe. But that's what they were saying. And Peduto claimed that there was looting and violence. I didn't see any of that. All of my friends who were there didn't see any of that. I think maybe there was a window broken, but that was actually a few blocks from where the protest actually was at, so it wasn't related at all. Um, Peduto even went so far as to claim that the only crowd control method they used was smoke, whatever that means, just smoke. He said they didn't use tear gas or rubber bullets or any of those things. Um, but the people who were there, the people who were on the ground crying, vomiting, and struggling to breathe from those chemicals, I think they know that's not true. And I'm one of those people. Uh, I was watching that press conference that night, and I was just astounded, because here I was sitting on my couch, or lying down on my couch, and my partner was cleaning the wounds on my legs and my back, um, from rubber bullets. And here the mayor was saying that they didn't use rubber bullets. That's just wrong in so many ways. But yeah, so I was injured when they shot rubber bullets at the crowd, which was really disconcerting, especially because there was so much tear gas and smoke everywhere that they really couldn't see what they were shooting at. Um, I know one of my friends was right next to somebody who got shot in the head with a rubber bullet, or a beanbag round or something, um, and was unconscious and bleeding. And they ended up having to take that person to the hospital themselves. Um, and that's another part of that evening that was really upsetting to me, was when the riot cops showed up, and the SWAT team and the military garb and stuff. They came with the big armored truck type thing, and it was followed by an ambulance. So great, ambulance, come help the wounded protesters. But no, they actually didn't render aid to any injured protesters, and all of the people who were seriously injured had to be transported to the hospital by other protesters. So that was, just, there were a whole lot of things wrong with that day and that evening, but that was one of the more upsetting parts. And actually, I am luckily now being represented in a lawsuit against the city and against the mayor and against some of the police commanders. This is a lawsuit that was filed by the Abolitionist Law Center and some other lawyers. If you don't know the Abolitionist Law Center, they do really great work, great advocacy, and work towards, trying to make sure people aren't spending time in jail and prison that shouldn't be. And they're really a great organization. But I'm actually going to share my screen in just a moment, and I can show you some of the pictures and videos from that day. And I will warn everyone right just now that it is pretty disturbing, and there are a couple graphic images, but I think it's important to see. So give me just a second. Okay. Oh.
I did make you a co-host. You should be able to get it up there.
Yeah, I just have to change my preferences really quick. Okay. So this is actually the Dropbox for the lawsuit. It has pictures and video that are being used as evidence in the complaint. And I'm gonna show you some of the videos of just what that scene looked like. And there's also some pictures of, injuries and stuff. So. So you can see that was really a pretty scary thing to be facing. Let's see. This is a picture of the aftermath of somebody that was very seriously injured. Again, had to be transported to the hospital by another protester in their own car. This video actually shows an instance where somebody who'd gone down an alleyway off of Center Avenue to escape the kind of the violence was actually kneeling on their knees, hands up, and was pepper sprayed, and it's pretty disturbing. And it cuts off there at the end, but there's a man in the military garb throwing a tear gas canister after the pepper spray. Okay, I guess we're not going to watch that one. And if you're curious, this is what rubber bullets do to you. That's my leg about a week after June 1st. You can see I got hit twice in the back of my right thigh, once in the back of my calf, my right calf, and you can't see it in this picture, but I also got hit once on the lower right side of my back. Well, that's another thing about the rubber bullets is that they're supposed to shoot them at the pavement so that they bounce up with less force, and then hit people on the legs or whatever. Still a bad idea in my book, but they definitely were not doing that. They were shooting them directly at people, and they were shooting through clouds of smoke, really just rendering their aim kind of irrelevant. So yeah, it was quite an experience. I'm just looking if there were any other videos I wanted to show you all. Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen again.
Here's some more water. Does anyone have milk? There's another big crowd coming my way, so it's time to keep moving.
So yeah, that's what tear gas does to you.
Mayor Bill Peduto ordered multiple investigations into the clashes between police and Mayor Bill Peduto ordered multiple investigations into the clashes between police and protesters in East Liberty on Monday.
And that was a young woman being shot in the chest with the tear gas canister. And this, I think this one might give you just a little bit of a better view of kind of what went down. Give it a second. Okay. That's fine. But yeah, so it really it was quite an experience. You know, some of the other folks who are being represented in this lawsuit, I can give their stories a little bit. I can't, explain it as well as they can, I'm sure. But there was a couple of parents who had brought their 13-year-old son to this protest. I believe they said they wanted to do it because they thought it's an important thing to do, an important thing to learn about, and they wanted their son to be able to have that experience of fighting for what's right and protesting when things need to change. And they were also there when that all went down. Basically what happened was they left in the direction that they were told to walk away, and got to about closer up to the target, which is kind of where we started. And they were walking past that big SWAT armored vehicle thing, and had more tear gas thrown at them. And basically, they shouted for their son to just run and get away. And both of the parents are asthmatic, and were really struggling to escape that tear gas. I think it was a really terrifying experience for them, and their son now is exhibiting symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is just quite upsetting and tragic.
Wilson, I didn't know if it would be all right for me to jump in at this point, but I wanted to give people opportunity to maybe ask questions or, reflect on everything that you've shared, which is a lot for us to consider. Would that be okay if we did that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good time for that.
I'm going to go ahead and lead off. I mean, maybe that was selfish on my part, but I think there are a good many people in my congregation who are progressive and share your values and have acted on those values as you have. But when the call comes out to defund the police, I think for some people in my faith community, that's going too far. How do you understand defund the police and why? I'm assuming you think that that's an important thing for us to consider as a society. And we'll be aware of questions in the chat as well. I don't know if you wanted to just comment off the cuff about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good question. And I think it's something that is going through a lot of people's minds. And it's quite understandable to have concerns about, what happens if there are less police officers? What happens if they have less funding? Doesn't that mean we're going to be less safe, or doesn't that mean there's going to be more crime? And where I stand on that, and where a lot of organizers in Pittsburgh stand on that, I'm working with a grassroots coalition called Stop the Station, where we're trying to stop the relocation of the Zone 5 police station from Washington Boulevard back into East Liberty. And one of our stated demands is to have the Pittsburgh Police be defunded by 50%, and to have that money reinvested in housing, healthcare, education, and social services. Now, the thinking behind that is, well, first of all, 50% defunding would take the police budget to the level that it was at when Bill Peduto got into office. Now, that's a lot of money that the police budget has been raised by in those years. And you think about it, and Pittsburgh's population has been decreasing. We don't need to keep expanding our police force. It's really just a bloated budget. And we believe that true crime prevention doesn't come from the police. It comes from healthy living situation. It comes from having affordable housing, having social services, having mental health care, having food to put on the table for your family. And without those things, that's oftentimes how people can get into crime. So it's not necessarily this thing where it's like, let's just immediately get rid of all the police, because I think everybody knows that that's unrealistic. But what it does mean is that we don't need so many police. They don't need so much money for militarized equipment, for riot gear, and these tanks. That I was downtown a couple of weeks ago for the Medicaid march with Put People First, and I saw a Port Authority armored vehicle drive by. It's like, why does Port Authority have an armored vehicle? So there's a ton of things to consider when we're talking about defunding the police. But what I would encourage everybody to do who has second thoughts about that, is concerned that defunding the police will lead to more crime, or less public safety. What I would encourage you to do is just be a little bit open to the idea that police does not necessarily equal public safety. And there are a lot of things that we can learn from on this topic. And I would love to share some resources with everybody. I was hoping possibly to get, if anybody who wants some resources could put their email in the chat or something, and I have a list of some things that I was going to send out. That it's, there's a lot of good reading out there on this topic, and a lot for all of us to learn. But that's
wonderful.
That's
wonderful. I want to draw attention to Marnie's question in the chat and then call on Andrew. She mentions in the chat, you mentioned being aware of the Antoine Rose shooting protest, generally being aware of Black Lives Matter movement. How did, if at all, your thoughts on police and politicians change due to your experiences? I think you answered some of that. You can answer it some more, but Marnie always brings her daughter, her oldest daughter, with her. And well, both of them. What advice would you give to them in terms of being involved to make change? And I've taken my 13, 14-year-old to many protests. It's terrifying. I can only imagine what you're feeling, Marnie. How would you react to that?
Yeah, it's funny that you have a 10th grader at DICE. There's actually, in this Stop the Station coalition, there are at least a few seniors at Alderdice who are organizing with us and who are, on the steering committee making big moves. And, I definitely encourage them to get in touch with us at Stop the Station if they're interested in that. I think it's great that they're going to protests. Some of the protests have been dying down some, but there are lots of local organizations that young people can get involved with here in Pittsburgh. There's One Hood. There's plenty of things, and that's something that I will share information about is more organizations to get involved with.
You see Andrew's question, and I would agree with it. You have so much cause to feel outrage. How do you maintain your compassionate demeanor? Do you feel anger about these issues? Great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. And I was not, I was not smiling the way I am right now that night, or, for a good while afterwards. And, I'm still very upset about it, and I'm angry. And, I think a lot of people feels really righteous anger and rage at these systems that are, oppressing people. And, I can be upset about this one protest where I got hurt and where other people got hurt, but Black people are living every day with these fears of being hurt by the police, and just so much generalized oppression and white supremacy that's so ingrained into our culture and our society. I can be mad, and I am mad sometimes, but I think it's not useful unless you try to channel that into some sort of action and change.
And your mother is reminding us that we do need to get to this work that you're doing. So can you finish up our time by talking about your work with Human Rights Coalition and solidarity, not solitary, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me of that, Mom. So I have gotten a little bit involved with a organization. It's a statewide organization here in Pennsylvania called Human Rights Coalition, or HRC. And they are doing a lot of work focusing right now, especially on ending long-term solitary confinement for incarcerated people here in Pennsylvania. HRC was founded by former prisoners and people who were currently in prison at the time. And they do a lot of great work, a lot of good organizing around these issues. There's actually 2 state bills right now that would effectively end solitary confinement for more than 15 days and end it altogether for vulnerable groups, including young people. And those bills, I believe it's like House Bill 497 and Senate Bill something, but I will include that in the information that I send out to everybody. I've also been involved with HRC has a Toxic Prisons campaign, which is a campaign where they're trying to fight for the closure of prisons that are environmentally toxic and unsafe to be in. So in particular, we've been working around State Correctional Institution Fayette, which is in the small town of LaBelle, southwest of Pennsylvania. And that prison was actually built right on top of a coal ash dump site with millions and millions of tons of coal ash. Now there are, extensive recorded health problems related to that. Whether it's rashes, respiratory problems, even cancer. The really outrageous part about all of that is that the guards and the correctional officers there at the prison filed a lawsuit in the past years to get bottled water because the water is not safe. And I'm actually going to share my screen just really quick again, because I think you all should see this. It's the water quality at, okay, how do I move? That's a Stop the Station event. It is the water quality of the town of LaBelle. And these are some scary chemicals. Bromoform, chloroform. I don't know how to say the rest of these, but these are some terrifying levels of these chemicals in the water. And something that was pointed out to me is that these don't actually track chemicals that are more commonly found just in coal ash and fracking runoff, which is also a potential problem for the water there. So this is terrifying. I'll send that website out to folks as well. But so the guards a few years back filed a lawsuit to get bottled water, and they won, and they drink bottled water now. But that lawsuit did not include people incarcerated there, and they still drink tap water. They cook with it and they bathe in it, and it's horrifying. So I'll absolutely send out some more information about HRC in general. They do monthly calls for organizing. They also do semi-frequent meetings called Voices from the Inside, where we hear from people who are currently incarcerated, either via video or by a statement read by a loved one. And those events are really powerful and heart-wrenching. And I think everybody here should try to get to one of those if possible. So yeah, I'll definitely include information about these. And maybe Vincent, if it's possible, maybe you could give me, like a list of emails, because I have these ones from the chat, but I want to make sure not to miss any.
I can keep track of who was in on the call and make sure that if you send it to me, I can send it out. Well, I'll give you the emails, CC you when I respond to you.
Perfect, thank you.
I really want to thank you for coming. I want to thank you for your taking your very traumatic experience and doing something about it to kind of, move the needle, so to speak. I'm really grateful for your witness to us today. Are there any other closing comments or questions that people want to ask of Wilson? So yes, from Phyllis, grateful for your work, especially for health and safety and addressing health equity with all of these things being engaged in that. So
I appreciate that. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. And I could go on for hours about these things, but I hope that this won't be the last time that we can, talk about these things and make plans to change them. So.
Well, you've rooked yourself into a second presentation, and I'm going to remember that. So we'll talk about that because I think it's going to be important to hear from you. I want to thank all the friends and family members of the Crossley Juring crowd who enlarged our circle today. It was great to have you with us. Next week, just so you know, we will get into What have been your coping mechanisms in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, since there aren't any social supports for us? In America, it seems like we're on our own. And so we're going to be using a book called Without Buddha, I Could Not Be a Christian by Paul Knitter, who is on the Union Theological Seminary faculty. And just a teaser, we anticipate that the Supreme Court nominee will go on to the Supreme Court, which means that Roe v. Wade is going to be probably in jeopardy. And it's typical for the Christian right to cherry pick Hebrew texts to justify protecting, in their minds, the unborn. But I'm going to have, we're going to be having Rachel Cranston, who's a University of Pittsburgh professor in religious studies, share how Jewish tradition and thinking and studying takes a different look at this very volatile topic. So she's going to be with us in November as well, and you're going to want to hear her. It's a very powerful kind of story about Jewish thinking. So again, I want to thank all of you for being in on the call. And again, Wilson, thank you so much.